of course, we got lots of questions. The first is my son is on a low level of Adderall and it's helped his impulse control, but his RSD still needs to be addressed. What can I do about this?
Rejection sensitivity dysphoria is doesn't respond very well to the stimulants. If you look at the three aspects that are universally agreed on, inattention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity, the stimulants do a marvelous job with the inattention. Now, once you get engaged, it keeps you from being distracted, but it doesn't do that good a job with impulsivity or hyperarousal. And for that, we have used a class of medications called alpha agonists. And there are two of them, guanfacine and clonidine. They are old blood pressure medications. The response rate, the dramatic, life-changing response rate to either one is about 30%, which is disappointing, but it's a different 30% for each one, so that if the first one doesn't work, you try the other one. And together, when you try both, you have about a 60% very robust, life-changing level of response. And there are several articles about the use of medications for RSD on Attitude Magazine.
Yes.
They're very simple medications to use. And again, originally when they were brought on the market in the 1960s, they were blood pressure medications. Now they're almost exclusively used for ADHD.
We have quite a few questions, variations on the same question, which is, how do I respond to relatives who doubt the validity of ADHD because I'm so good at masking, or how to explain to folks that my symptoms are from a disorder, not lack of discipline? How do I talk to teachers who don't understand the condition and its challenges? So there are variations of how do I help people to understand that this is real and impairing in these different situations.
Mm-hmm. Once again, you have to divide into people who really want to know, who just haven't been exposed to it and just don't get it. And people who their goal is to blame somebody. They don't want anybody to get out the door without being punished for their behavior or their failures. The people who really want to know, you can say, you don't know what it took for me to get this far, with no help at all. School didn't help, doctors didn't help, you didn't help. I've done everything on my own. When I meet the criteria, the medications are life-changing. Believe me, it's there. And it's a genetic disorder. So that means that half of our first-degree genetic relatives are also ADHD. So look at cousin so-and-so, look at, my grandson or whatever. Do you accept that they have ADHD? You choose somebody who's, pretty hyperactive and disruptive, or somebody who's, failed to keep a job ever. And you say, you sit there because it's a genetic disorder. It doesn't go away. And half of the people in the family are going to be ADHD. Now, they may not know it, but if you give that checklist, the Vanderbilt checklist is the one that's in the public domain, what you're going to find is there's a lot of ADHD in the family. Now, there's a bunch of people who just like to blame people for two reasons. One is that if it's your fault, you've done something wrong, then they don't have to help you. You're at fault. Why should they help somebody who's lazy or no self-control? And so it absolves them from helping. Conversely, it also, they believe, absolves them from any responsibility for being mean, nasty, demeaning to you, calling you names, you're lazy, again, they're looking to blame somebody because it gives them what they think is a socially acceptable way of being mean and vicious to other people because it's their fault. But these are people who are confused. They confuse fixing the blame and fixing the problem. To them, they're one and the same. So these are people who enjoy going around and finding where everybody did it wrong. These are people who are not going to change. They like hurting other people so much they're not going to give it up. So the first thing you do is this person genuinely open to new information? Again, one of the first things I suggest people do is ask the person, is there anything I can do? What would it take for you to listen and be open to new information? And they will tell you right then. Now, people who are genuinely open will say, oh, I'd really like to know more because of, and usually it's somebody else in the family. Other people will just repeat their accusations that have no basis. So you can separate it out. There's one group you can spend your time with, and the other one you need to avoid at all costs, at all times.
Someone writes, my son thinks ADHD is something you can power through. How can I persuade him that medication might make his life easier?
You're not going to persuade anybody. I mean, he doesn't want to. He just rather want to take medication, and so he's saying, without any knowledge, it's not going to help me. So again, he doesn't know. He's just saying that because you can't convince him otherwise, because he doesn't want to hear it. It makes a huge difference. I mean, all those statistics I went through about the terrible damage that ADHD does if left untreated. And so you have to wait for the right time, a time in which ADHD has really sabotaged their life. You can't force them to take it. They have to see that ADHD is a factor and that you can't just power through it. And again, that's why all of the therapies failed, is they're just variations on try the same thing that failed, only try it harder and longer. It doesn't work. So if they don't want to take the medication, bide your time. Life gets harder, and ADHD is going to impair them more and more. Now, if it's an adolescent boy, I'll just point out that his ADHD keeps him from getting dates. That's the thing that's going to motivate an adolescent boy.
Okay. And our last question is, my husband refuses to believe my son has ADHD and anxiety. So he's suffering because I'm his only advocate. Do you have any suggestions?
This is a situation you see very often in divorced families, where one spouse knows that the ADHD is there, but they're denying care to the child just to defeat and frustrate the other parent. I don't want to admit this, but that's the primary motivator. And so this is a speech that I usually give to these folks, and it's failed only once in 50 years of practice. What I'm saying is, Mom, Dad, I know that you have the very best interests of your child at heart. And whatever you decide, I can certainly accept that. But you need to know that 5 or 10 years from now, your child is going to come to you and ask you the following question, and you need to be prepared to answer it. They're going to say, Mom, Dad, let me get this straight. Back in 2025, you knew, or you had reason to know, that I had ADHD. It was impairing, and anxiety. It was impairing my life, my sleep, my friendships. I was uncomfortable in my own skin. I struggled with academics. I was dabbling with drugs to self-medicate. And let me get this straight. You did nothing. You didn't even let me try. What that does is it shifts, because the parent knows that that day is going to come. And they're going to have to bear the blame for what happened to their child. And those parents, in order to avoid that, will at least okay a trial on medication to see what it has to offer. and deal with the reality of what the medications are rather than a hidden agenda of getting back at his ex or defeating his spouse. That speech works almost all the time. The one time it didn't, the guy was an utter psychopath, but that's another story.
Well, Dr. Dodson, that has to be our last question because we're out of time. But thank you so much for joining us today to kick off ADHD Awareness Month. We appreciate you.